I've tried to make Christmas specials happen on this channel a few times, but if I'm being honest, they've never quite felt right. And I think that's because I keep forgetting the real reason for the season. It's not about the lights, the presents, the cryptids hiding in Gourd Lake, or the rumors floating around Tokyo that if you confess your love on Christmas Eve, your wishes will come true. It's about the virgin birth of a prophet and visionary sent by a higher power to guide humanity.
彼は現代に蘇ったヒトラーそのもの。この地上に再び
You know, if I had a nickel for every religious anime where a guy named Roberto fights the demonic spirit of Hitler, I really don't want this second nickel, actually. Would somebody please take this nickel from me? Oh, shit, right. Exchange rate. Vatican Miracle Examiner is kind of like X-Files if Scully were a guy and both of them were Scully and there was way more sexual tension. Also, in this case, Scully does want to believe because instead of alien shit, they're investigating Catholic shit, using science and logic to debunk false claims of miracles on behalf of the Vatican and occasionally battle some demons from hell, like the aforementioned Adolf. The anime is based on a josei manga, which was based on a series of light novels which were originally adapted into a seinen manga, but then that didn't sell very well, so they decided to lean into the bishi market instead, and while that manga only ran for 2 years, the light novels are still going, and the fangirls are still drawing doujins, and the series has generated 156 works and counting on Archive of Our Own, including 4 in the last month, so clearly, that was a very smart business decision. And between you and me, my analytics have been a bit of a sausage fest lately, so I'm hoping that roasting some girl trash with crossover appeal will be a smart business sausage. What was I talking about? Right, business. This roast is sponsored by Factor. The holidays are always hectic. With everything you've got to get done, eating right can be a real challenge. Cooking is hard, takeout is unhealthy and expensive, and frozen dinners taste like, well, frozen dinners. But Factor solves all of those problems by sending fresh, chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals straight to your door every week, ready to heat up and eat up in 2 minutes flat. With flexible plans that let you order anywhere between 4 and 18 meals a week, depending on your needs, reschedule around your Christmas shopping, and even pause the orders when it's time to go to grandma's. I find Factor especially helpful this time of year because it saves precious hours of cooking and grocery shopping that I can spend watching great anime for my big end of year list instead. Though, on the flip side, it also saves precious hours I could have spent cooking or shopping instead of watching terrible anime for my big end of year list. I am so tired. But at least I'm not hungry. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50MB to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50MB at factor75.com for 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. After quite possibly the least necessary disclaimer screen of all time, the series kicks off with an enigmatic cold open on a group of hooded figures chanting nonsense words at a runic Ouija board as a medieval plague doctor looks on. Though any sense of mystery or atmosphere this scene might have created is instantly dispelled by the show's strict rule that no more than 10 seconds may pass without someone yapping. In this case, the ornery Catholic school security guard who catches them doing it. His yapping does give rise to a new mystery of why one old drunk guy would be hired to oversee an entire combination church and school complex so huge it has its own barn and functioning aqueduct system and state-of-the-art private hospital, but we barely have time to register that thought before he stumbles into the shower scene from Psycho. Though in this case, the unconvincing fake blood isn't flowing from Jamie Lee Curtis's mom, but the stigmatted up hands of a floating blonde twink. A twink I briefly mistook for Prince Baka from Level E, popping into a different anime to f*** with even more humans. Sorry, I know that reference isn't doing much for most of you, but trust me, the 12 total fans of that show are laughing their asses off right now. And honestly, I even started thinking, unironically, that theory might have some real legs when an old Mexican cab driver started yapping about his grandpa seeing UFOs descending from the sky back in the day. But somehow, the actual explanation for him floating, the blood coming out of his hands, and especially those UFOs, is even funnier. Son of a bitch, Joseph. Spoilers. But speaking of guys who know their way around the pair of balls, after the credits, a different shower scene introduces us to a different twink. Our hero, Father Yosef Ko-Hiraga. Because this show knows exactly what its audience wants. And it gives them that in spades as our other, more bara hero, Father Roberto Nicholas, gently wakes him up from sleeping at his desk and even irons his habit for him while he's showering. And also yapping. Because nothing ever stops these characters from yapping. Not bathing, not other people yapping, not using the secret iris scanners embedded in the base of the statue of Pope Pius VIII leading to the Vatican's secret Men in Black backrooms. Nothing. And that yapping informs us that Hiraga was up late planning over 563 moves ahead in the game of Angels and Demons, which is apparently a more complex version of Go, the most complex board game currently known to man, played with magnetic pieces on a looping game board wrapped around the inside of a massive wooden hamster wheel, which Hiraga also invented, by the way, in case all that other stuff didn't make him seem like enough of a genius already. Also, he believes that if he can mathematically solve the game so White wins, it will somehow maybe help to cure his crippled little brother's terminal bonitis. And frankly, I think that just having a narrator pause the story to explain all this stuff directly to the audience would have felt less artificial than Hiraga contriving excuses to tell his best friend all about his backstory and motivations and what their job entails, and also reaffirm that they both believe in miracles on their walk to work. Plus, it probably would have taken like half the time. Now, I know it sounds a bit rich for me to complain about media that yaps too much, but they really just never shut the up in this show. And it's a shame, because in the brief 2-second snippets of silence we get between exposition dumps and vaguely homoerotic flirting, there's some pretty banging music in this OST, including one of the best arrangements of Ave Maria I've heard outside Hitman Blood Money. Speaking of the Virgin Mary, though, Archbishop Saul has called the boys to his office today to investigate a reported Immaculate Conception at St. Rosario, that ludicrously huge Catholic boarding school from the cold open. Though, of course, he doesn't actually believe the claim. That would contradict core Catholic dogma. Investigating it is just a pretext to get Hiraga and Roberto inside the compound, which the church suspects is secretly a hotbed of covert devil worship. Though, surprisingly, that doesn't seem to involve the most likely suspects, those kids with the Ouija board from the cold open, since as the priests approach the school, we catch two of them, Carlos and Sebastian, excitedly speculating about whether these Vatican envoys are here for their floating, hand-bleeding blonde buddy Mario, whom the show singles out by throwing this obnoxious wood frame around his face when he's introduced, something that never happens for any other character. And you might think, based on that, plus his prominence in the opening, and the fact that him just sort of bleeding all over the place is the key image for the entire series on Amazon Prime, that he's a really important character, but nope, some animator just felt like doing that. After a quick prayer break in the chapel, taking note of the beautiful stained glass martyr portraits that definitely aren't foreshadowing anything, plus a Lance of Longinus replica that the Padres head off to investigate that madre they're here to see, Ana Dolores, who, by an astounding coincidence, also happens to be leaking blood out of her hands that's definitely not just sloppily recolored sakura blossom particles when they arrive. And even though it's just a cover story, they do take the job very seriously.
こちらがアンナの処女膜。再生手術を行った痕跡は見当たりません。
outside the hospital, after they're done dismissing the possibility of artificial insemination out of hand because, I don't know, she just seems really honest, they're briefly spooked by a crazy old lady with what looks like a two-headed baby in her arms, but then they just kind of forget that happened and go back to their rooms and have another very organic conversation about how Haraga's the team's science and math guy, while Roberto's their books and cryptography guy. A clarification that I actually did kind of appreciate because I had no idea what Sukino was doing here besides looking handsome. After that, they're invited to dinner by this conspicuously hot nun named Dorothea, where Father Johannes, the head of the academy, introduces all the other men in the church individually by their suspiciously German names, then says, oh yeah, we got some girls too. Then one more priest wanders in late, making awkward excuses, but he's interrupted by the conspicuously hot nun doing something conspicuously hot. Back in the room again, Hiraga gets an email from his buddy back at the Vatican, Lauren, who looked into Sister Dolores's apparently non-existent gynecological records for them, as well as how a humble Mexican church could afford to furnish a state-of-the-art hospital on its massive private estate.
セントロザリオの預金額は3000万ドル。
教会の資産にしては高額すぎるな。
You can tell this wasn't written in America. But that does confirm that something nefarious is afoot at this church, and, as if on cue, Roberto spots someone skulking around near the church's barn. Then Father Hiraga stumbles into a spooky Catholic hell dream about his bonitis brother being able to walk again and also possessed by the devil, and no sooner has he waken up from that than it turns out that Father Klaus had his head bashed in that very barn as part of some sort of satanic ritual type thing. But it seems like the forces of good are ready to clash with this evil on campus, because the next day, when the understandably shaken student body goes to mourn him at morning mass, with Carlos in particular being suspiciously shook by Father Klaus's passing, the boys are given another miracle to debunk.
奇跡だ！マリア様が！マリア様が！
By the way, in case you're curious, this show was made in 2017. That is 2017 CGI. Anyway, debunk it they do, in record time at the start of the next episode, when a thermal camera reveals that the statue was just really cold that morning and collected a bunch of dew as a result. No explanation as to why it looked like she was crying instead of sweating, but that's not what's important here. What's important is that anyone who remembers this yaoi bait from last episode
どうした？
いや、あまりに冷たくて痛いくらいでした。
is now a step ahead of the investigation. Though at the moment, Father Johannes is showing a suspicious lack of interest in that investigation, insisting that the statue crying was definitely a miracle and shooing the examiners out of his office before they can share their counter-explanation. On the way out, though, they notice a second principal's office next to his, apparently the sealed quarters of the church's founder, Michael Brown, who fixed it up and took in a bunch of orphans after the war, including most of the current clergy, which is why they've left his room as it was when he died, out of respect for his saintly demeanor, and also why no one, especially not no meddling kids, is allowed to go in there and look at anything.
中を見せていただくことは
なりません。ここはミハエル司祭の魂が宿る神聖な場所。たとえバチカンの使者であるあなた方であっても、好奇心を満たすためだけに入ることはなりません。絶対に。
Great job, Pops. They suspect nothing. Of course, it's not long before more bodies start turning up. Sexy nun body this time. Also, awkward priest guy body, whom we see nervously visiting the sexy nun's room the night before they both die. I guess they weren't as slick as they thought they were with all their subtle flirting at dinner. And neither was the director, who cut away to exactly one other guy's face in that scene, and that guy's the murderer. Anywho, with 3 bodies on the floor, we now have enough to establish a clear pattern, which is that the killer is mimicking the deaths of all those martyrs from the stained glass windows. What a shock! They were foreshadowing something after all. Beneath those very windows, Johannes assembles the student body once more to tell them what's going on. But before he can, Mario, fucking drama queen that he is, makes it all about him.
コールだ！マリオにまた神のコールがかかったぞ！
あなたは私の最初の子羊。あなたの犠牲の上に
我が王国は成り立つ。
本当に覚えていないのですね。
When they go to ask the faculty about Mario's episodes, because he doesn't remember anything, the examiners discover that both Guardsman James and Father Johannes were there the first time, and they both saw him floating in the air next to a massive runic cross that someone drew in blood on the wall next to him, which Johannes promptly erased because it was Mass the next day and he didn't want the kids freaking out about it. And somehow, he managed to do it without smearing the blood at all, because when Hiraga sprays luminol all over the place, the runes are pristine and perfectly legible. Or they would be legible if they weren't complete gibberish, which Roberto reasons means they must be some kind of code. But that's not the only trace they find. First, there's a bunch of bloody footprints scattered around the altar, one adult and one student they assume to be Mario. And second, another trail of similarly sized adult footprints leads to a massive pool of blood directly under that Mary statue, which was, of course, the real murder weapon that took out Father Klaus, as any self-respecting Ace Attorney gamer should have instantly guessed the second they saw it. So all along, when everyone thought that Father Klaus was simply hit in the head with a big rock and died in that barn, actually, the killer had lured him out to the chapel, where he dropped the statue on him, then dragged his body to the barn and I guess poured a bunch more blood around it to make it look like the crime scene. Then he went back to the chapel, cleaned up that blood, carried the 300-pound statue outside and dumped it in the ice-cold fountain. Then he picked it back up and dragged it back inside when everyone was busy investigating the fake crime scene, thus causing the statue to look like it was crying the next morning, and more importantly, can't actually think of a way that helped hide any evidence or create an alibi. The perfect crime. Now, you might be thinking, duh, Geoff, you forgot the footprints. They could easily match those to one of the 7 adult men left on campus. I mean, what are the odds they'd even have the same shoe size? And you're right, they could do that. But they don't. Father Hiraga does conclude from the blood traces that Klaus's killer must have been there the night of Mario's first episode, demonstrating that he is, in fact, aware of the concept of matching footprints. But then all he does with that info is ask his buddy Lauren to do a background check on the security guard because his story about Mario floating is seeming a little sus now. On the subject of sus, they start remembering all the times that old man Joseph has yelled at them about stuff at times when it was kind of distracting from the stuff they were trying to do, which makes them think that maybe he could be the killer. But then, that night at dinner,
何しろ一度に3つもの尊い命が。おや、ジョゼフ神父は
せいアンデレ逆さずりの上串刺し。
guess that crosses him off the list. Also, while they're busy dealing with that, this tall, dark, extremely wet man we've never seen before shows up at the hospital to take Sister Anna Dolores away. But we're gonna put a pin in that for a sec, because as soon as there's no old man around to yell at them about it, the examiners decide to make a beeline to break and enter in the old principal's office. And they find quite a bit more inside than just some dusty old books. Like a dusty old man.
よほど特別な存在だったんだな。
Also, yet another Lance of Longinus replica that looks exactly like the one that disappeared from the British Museum. But that's still just the tip of the iceberg, and honestly, this is the place where the pacing of the mystery, whatever was left anyway, just completely falls apart. Because in a minute and a half, Roberto manages to stumble across an original ancient satanic Bible, plus a whole book full of them mysterious runes, and while he's doing that, Hiraga opens up this door with a false bottom that contains the other half of this broken Satan worship MacGuffin thing that Father Saul originally sent them to the church to find. This whole scene feels like you're just watching someone speedrun a point-and-click adventure, complete with a stupid little puzzle minigame.
ビンゴだ。
With that flag tripped, they finally get another email from Lauren with the deets about the security guard, and Hiraga decides to call him up on Zoom and ask him to hack into the Vatican bank records to search the secret level 4 donor list for any Heinrichs. Right after that, Johannes calls them out into the hallway to introduce this new priest guy we've never met before, Father McGee, who's quite obviously the guy who came for Anna in the last episode, and apparently their room neighbor.
数日前から病院に詰めて遺伝子の研究をしていたとのことで
Sure, normal priest stuff, makes sense. McGee doesn't talk much, or at all, or shake hands, apparently, and it's a really awkward conversation, but they're saved from that when it's revealed that Carlos has been possessed by a demon, an extremely hammy demon.
俺が地獄まで連れて行く邪魔するんじゃねえ
カルロス
Luckily, these priests know how to exercise and look sexy doing it. But this demon's a tough one and also weirdly familiar.
クラウスさ俺の名はクラウス・ベックだ俺は生前から悪魔と取引していた生まれ変わったのさ
The kid's acting pretty dang crazy, and the power of Christ doesn't seem to be compelling him at all, which causes Hiraga to have an epiphany and find the real demon behind his actions. Ha! You thought it was Satan, but it was me! Cocaine!
それを返せ
After that, we learn Carlos's tragic backstory, which is that Klaus was drugging him up and doing, Catholic priest stuff to him in that barn.
カソリックの神父が学生を慰め者にするとはな
You really think someone would do that?
Which lends some credence to the theory that's been brewing ever since they found Sister Sausage Gobbler's body that the killer might be punishing sinners, and also explains where Saint Rosario might be getting all those millions of dollars from. Drug smuggling. Before they have a chance to look into that, though, it's finally time to shut the book on security guard James and the mystery of the floating Mario.
ジェームズさん
どうしたんです神父さん
すみません平賀神父を見かけませんでしたか
いいえ
動いているものしか認識できなかったとはね
So it turns out, a couple of years back, James suffered a traumatic head injury, which apparently afflicted him with Jurassic Park T-Rex vision, and that's why he thought that Mario was floating, when in reality, there was a murderer strangling him who was standing perfectly still, which of course means that Father Johannes was lying to cover for that killer all along. As for Mario's mysterious stigmata, that's simply a condition called hematidrosis, which causes blood to ooze out of a person's sweat glands under extreme stress, which is actually a real thing that can happen in the real world, though in the real world there are only a handful of recorded cases throughout all of human medical history, but sure, why not? That's what happened to him. And also Anna, there can be two of those in the same place. Mystery solved, miracle busted. As for Anna's other miracle, that actually lines up with a prophecy from that satanic Bible they found in the principal's office that the devil will one day send his own spawn to a virgin mother to save the world, which we learn more about the next day after they catch Father McGee spying on them talking about that, and then we see a quick cutaway to Father Thomas Simeon begging the looming shadow of a two-headed demon to stop all the killing. So guess we know who the murderer is now, when Hiraga suddenly remembers that old lady with the two-headed baby who spooked them 2 episodes ago. Look, I know it sounds like I'm bouncing all over the place with this summary, but that is actually how the show's edited together. Anyway, that lady certainly is spooky, but she's also full of very helpful information.
男の人と接したことのない私が授かった可愛いでしょ父もとっても喜んでくれたのよこの子は神だ家主神の生まれ変わりだって天から使わされたの大きなアークに乗って私の父はセントロザリオの理事ミハエル・ブラウンよ
The nice men who come to take Mary away tell the priests that she was driven mad when her deformed baby died, even though she had another healthy baby not long after, and that they definitely shouldn't listen to anything that poor schizophrenic lady has to say. But of course, it's far too late for that, and the pieces are already falling into place, starting with what that cab driver said about the UFO that showed up back in 1945.
旧ナチス所有していた巨大飛行船の中で未だ1隻だけ行方不明の機体ラズブルグ号まさか
Turns out some Catholic clergymen helped the Nazis go into hiding after the war, just like in real life. And we soon learned from Lauren that, in the anime at least, that conspiracy goes all the way to the top of the Vatican Bank, whose highest-ranking officials are all secretly tied up in Nazi gold-funded, Swiss bank-laundered insider trading through the fake charity front organization known as Heinrich. That book of runes that Roberto found in the office may well contain even more secrets of their organization, but of course it's encoded just like that cross, so they'll need some kind of cipher key if they want to read it. Luckily, there's been one hiding in plain sight right under their noses all along, the Ouija board them kids do their seances with. But before they can go grab it, it's time for another motherfucking Psycho reference. Don't worry, they're just fooling. They have no time to find that hidden gunman, though, because they've got teenagers to tackle and Nazi crosswords to decode. Very Nazi crosswords.
超人はすでに我々の中に存在している。
彼は勇猛で残酷だその有名な一節です
ヒトラ
Also, it turns out that Heinrich ain't just any Heinrich.
ーいや待てハインリヒミュラーとある
ナチス戦犯の中で逮捕もされず死亡も確認されていない唯一の人物です
これは第三帝国の真の始まりなのだナチスの将来を担う若者たちと共に崇高なるものを運び出し新天地を目指すのだ私の新しい名前は
ミハイル・ブラウン
So all the so-called war orphans that Mr. Brown rescued, the priests with whom they've been sharing dinner every night, were second-generation Nazis all along, and a few first-gen ones. And what's more, ever since the war, they've been using this school to brainwash unwitting South American children into the next generation of Hitler youth. Huh. That would explain Florida. Mary was one of those children, adopted and groomed by Mueller himself from 8 years old to be artificially inseminated with the new Nazi Messiah. Gross. And while their first attempt didn't work out, the second one produced Father Thomas Simeon, the true killer, who's still got a lot of stained glass to get through and not a lot of episodes, so...
Leon Russell
父さんレオンは殉教者となったのだ
ああそうだな
Damn, bro, that's your own dad. Though, I guess he was a Nazi. Chasing Thomas leads the examiners down to a secret underground bunker, hidden beneath the Lance of Longinus that looks exactly like the one that disappeared from the British Museum. There, they uncover the drug lab that's been supplying the church with money by sending covert shipments down the aqueducts. Bet you didn't expect those to actually be plot relevant. And further down still, they find the remaining Nazi Satanists worshipping Father Thomas, his freaky Siamese twin brothers, and that object most holy and noble that Mueller brought with him to Mexico, which wasn't the Lance of Longinus that looks exactly like the one that disappeared from the British Museum after all.
このお方は
ヒトラー
ヒトラーほどの独裁者です自分の遺体を冷凍保存させていたのならその生死もつまり彼は現代に蘇ったヒトラーそのもの
ヒトラー
Unfortunately for the Nazoids, ever since he was born, none of their Hitler particle detectors have picked up anything from Thomas, so eventually they decided to try again.
シスターアンナ・ドロレスにヒトラーの
ヒトラー
But of course, right after they did, he finally awakened his inner Hitler.
What am I gonna do? I'm Hitler's top guy. What am I gonna do? Adolf Hitler chose me to lead the revolution.
Then he went on a serial murder spree, as Hitlers are wont to do, and he's still not out of stained glass windows yet, so...
これでお前も許された。
After that, his Hitler senses start tingling, alerting him to the presence of the examiners spying on them, so he sends his followers to get them, activating a hypnotic signal to turn all the sleeping students into Nazi zombies. Trapped in the chapel, the examiners do manage to take out some of their pursuers, but with his Ubermenchian super strength, Hitler bursts through the rubble wielding an axe. Luckily, these priests know how to exercise and look sexy doing it.
何時最も下劣なる霊よ我らが敵の軍勢よ
そんなものが
神を恐れよ
Which I guess proves that miracles are real after all. Or so it seems.
実はあの瓶の中身は硫酸でした。
硫酸?
Oh, well, that explains that. In one final twist, it turns out Father McGee was actually a spy for a secret organization tasked with taking out Nazi remnants around the world, and so was Sister McSlut and that other guy, which is the real reason they got murdered. They weren't boning at all. She just gobbled that sausage like that to distract everyone from his terrible acting. Also, Father McGee's the guy who blew up the underground bunker a few seconds ago, and on top of that, he took out all of Hitler's other soldiers that were still frozen at the hospital. So never again will mankind have to fear the return of that horrible bloodline. Except, of course, for Sister Dolores' baby, but you know, they're Catholic, it's not like they can abort it. Thus, the curtain falls on the first arc of Vatican Miracle Examiner, raising the important question of where the f*** do you even go from there? And unfortunately, the answer is nowhere anywhere near as funny. There is a killer Santa Claus in the next episode, but only for like a minute, and the rest of it's this really awkward flashback within a flashback about this guy whose dad, the demon lord Azazel, went out to get cigarettes one day and left him with the power to grant 1,000 wishes, but they're all monkey paw wishes, and then later he gets married to a dolphin trainer, but it turns out she never existed, which is way less fun than I'm making it sound, trust me. Then, aside from this one bit where Roberto's put on trial before Satan himself with a snake man for a lawyer, the arc after that's kind of just a vaguely racist snooze fest. But if you can push through all of that, the final arc is about killer clowns, so there's definitely a light at the end of this tunnel, even if it never quite reaches the heights of insanity that we've enjoyed today. You can go watch that on your own time, though, because frankly, I'm all Hitlered out, and we've got a big end-of-year video to work on. Though, Yazzie and I did film our reactions to the entire series, which should be going up in highlights on the second channel in the next few days. Or, if you want to watch the whole thing with us, we'll be posting the uncut reactions to our Patreon. So please look forward to that, the best and worst of the year, and all the other fun stuff we have planned. Until then, though, I'm Geoff Thew, professional anime where a guy named Roberto fights the demonic spirit of Hitler Roaster, signing out.